Hello and welcome to my channel. If you're new here, my name's Sue Findlay and today I'm going to be painting 3 mini seascapes. As you can see, I'm starting out on 3 4x4 inch canvas panels. Now, I've previously done many seascapes on small boards and large boards using resin, but this is the first time I've done one using acrylic paint, so I'm going to share the processes with you today. So I'm going to start out with painting the sand. Now I start off with an almost sort of warm feeling sand, but then once this dried I realised that the colour was too yellow. The sand here in Western Australia is very white and it's almost grey when the water goes over the top, so I felt for me the colour wasn't right, so I do go back later on and repaint the sand. Unfortunately I didn't turn on the video camera when I did that. It was only after I'd finished doing it and went to turn it off that I realised I'd then turned it on, so apologies for that. But the process is the same. I would start off with a base layer of the colour and then come back and add the details later on. And because I'm doing these all the same, I'm working them across as if it's one piece. Now you could have it as 3 individual pieces or as a triptych. So for this I'm just blocking in the colours, and as you can see I'm just mixing the colours on my palette until I get the right colours that I'm looking for. And it's not perfect at this stage, so as you can see I'm just using a flat brush and I'm just going to add the colour. I do end up changing to a filbert brush because I felt that it was a little bit too flat and was giving me the patterns were a little bit too blocky, so I'm just going to change the brush over and then continue. So nearest the shoreline I'm starting off with a very light blue, so I'm mixing phthalo turquoise with a touch of white, and then I'm just going to add more of the turquoise as I move further out to sea, so it'll get a bit darker the closer we are to the top edge. So I'm just in a circular motion just blocking in those colours. Doesn't need to be perfect because we'll come back in and do a little bit of detail once we've got the base colours down. So now we're just going to add a touch of white to the sand area. So I've mixed this with a little bit of water so that it's quite transparent, so this will dry a little bit darker than it is, but it will still show lighter shades. So this is where the surf is going to go, so I'm just marking out where the white of the surf is going, and as you can see again I'm just using small circular motions to create that surf line. So now I'm just adding some of the detail into the water. So as you can see I'm just using a dabbing motion and just applying small amounts of paint over the top, so that because the water is not perfect we are just adding some contrast and some highlights to this area to give the impression that there's reflections and shadows within the water. So now that we've created the details in the water, it's now time to work on the surf. So now I'm going to pick out the front edge of the water. That's going to have the darkest or the most opaque of the white. So I'm just going to map out those areas of where the surf is going to stop and then the sand begins. So we're just going to go around across all those, using again the very small flat brush. So now we have the basic shape of the surf. I'm now using a palette knife to add extra texture and dimension to the surf. So just applying a small amount of paint to the backside of the palette knife, I'm now dabbing it across the surface to create some ridges in the surf, and also adding some extra highlights to the water itself. So as you can see, I'm just using a dabbing motion and just dabbing those across the surface. Next I'm going to add some depth to the sand, so I'm adding some white to show any ridges in the sand, and then adding some darker areas near to the surf to show shadows and any areas, low-lying areas in the sand. So the sand would not be the perfect colour, you need to add a little bit of depth and colour to it to give the impression that it's more three-dimensional. And what I've done is I've just watered down the white slightly, just so that once it dries it's transparent, and then using my finger to then blend that so we don't have any brush marks. So now we're going to add a little bit of dimension to the surf by creating shadows at the edges of the surf. This just gives the impression then that the water's not flat and that it's got some height to it in areas, because it's not going to sit completely flat on the sand, so we need to give it a more three-dimensional look. So by adding some shadows to the edges gives it more of a three-dimensional feel. So while that's drying, I'm going to prepare these boards to create some mini frames. Now I got these on sale at the reject shop, and they do have a sticker on the back which I will remove and then paint it white, but I want to paint the inside of these boards to then create a custom frame for them. So I started out using a foam brush, but then I decided that an actual brush would work better because I was struggling to get the paint into the corners of the box frame. And I'm using an undercoat and sealer to seal the MDF and wood, and then I'll come back later with another coat and possibly a coat of white acrylic paint just to give it, because that's more plastic, it'll give it a nice finish also. So while my makeshift frames are drying, I'm now coming back and adding some gel medium to the surface to give it a glossy finish, but also to add some additional texture. So I'm going to go across the surface here and create a lip at the edges of the foam, but also to create ripples on the design, so that when you hold it up to the light you'll see ripples in there, but because this dries clear you will still see the colour underneath, so it just gives it a nice glossy finish without having to apply resin to it. So welcome back, it's the next day and we're now going to add some gel medium to the back of these panels and we're going to glue them into the frames. So I'm using a generous amount of the gel medium because that acts like a glue, and we're going to stick these into the center of our frames. Now the good thing with gel medium, it will remain wet for a while, so you can slide it around and position it and get it in the center and readjust it, and then all you need to do then is just leave it to fully dry. I think you'll agree these little white frames, box frames, give it a nice dimension. So even though these are small panels, placing them in the center of slightly larger boxes and giving it a little bit of room around each one really helps the piece stand out. So I'm really pleased with how these have turned out. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video. If so, please give it a thumbs up, or better still, subscribe to my channel. I shall see you in the next video. Bye for now.